Arnold Schwarzenegger stepped onto the stage with a familiar confidence, smiling wide and waving as the crowd roared their approval. Dressed in a sharp blazer and exuding the kind of charisma that made him both a Hollywood icon and a respected political voice, Arnold looked every bit the legend the audience came to see. He had no idea that by the end of the night, the conversation would spiral into a clash so sharp, so unforeseen, that it would send ripples far beyond the studio walls. Jimmy Kimmel rose from his desk to greet him with a warm handshake and a grin. The Terminator himself, the Governator, ladies and gentlemen, Arnold Schwarzenegger. The cheers were deafening. It was meant to be a light-hearted reunion, a mix of nostalgic film talk and playful ribbing about Arnold's post-politics life. That was the plan anyway. Arnold eased into the interview chair, relaxed and ready. "Great to be here, Jimmy," he said in that unmistakable Austrian accent, his voice calm and friendly. "You always know how to bring the laughs." The banter started off smoothly. They touched on his fitness routines, joked about his age-defying strength, and even laughed about how Arnold once told a California lawmaker, "I'm not a man who likes to waste time." Everything was going according to script. For a while. But then Kimmel took a slight turn. "You've been pretty vocal lately," Jimmy said, shifting in his chair, "especially about climate change and politics. Still not ready to just kick back and chill out like other retired governors, huh?" Arnold grinned. "Jimmy, there's no retirement from responsibility." He leaned forward slightly, his tone still measured but serious. "Climate change is no joke. It's not political, it's personal. I've seen towns wiped out by fires. I've seen what droughts do to farms. This isn't about one party or another. It's about survival." The studio was still with interest. Arnold's conviction was tangible. Kimmel, always aiming to keep things light, smiled and nodded. But then he fired off a line that would ignite the moment. "Sure, but don't you think sometimes people take this doom and gloom stuff too far? Like, I get it, the planet's important, but people tune in to get a break from the panic." Arnold's smile faded. His posture stiffened not in anger, but in resolve. "Jimmy," he said, voice low and steady, "you're one of the most influential voices in late-night television. People trust you. When you dismiss these issues, even in jest, you send a message that they're not urgent. But they are. We don't get a second chance." There was a noticeable shift in the room, not from tension, but awareness. Kimmel wasn't expecting that answer. He tried to pivot. "Well, hey, I'm just a funny guy." "That's your job to save the world, Arnold." But Arnold wasn't playing along anymore. "No, Jimmy," he replied, leaning forward now. "It's everyone's job. Every person has power. Even the funny guy." A small murmur ran through the audience. They weren't sure whether to laugh or hold their breath. Kimmel, realizing he'd underestimated Arnold's seriousness, sat back. There was a beat of silence, not the kind that kills a conversation, but the kind that sharpens it. It wasn't hostile, it wasn't aggressive. But it was clear. The tone had shifted, and Arnold wasn't backing off from what mattered most to him. The rest of the segment carried on, but the energy was different. Arnold's answers were thoughtful, passionate, unwavering. He wasn't there to entertain. He was there to awaken. Kimmel, slightly flustered, tried to regain rhythm, but it was clear that the show wasn't his anymore. Arnold had taken control, not by force, but by the sheer weight of truth. And as the cameras panned to the applauding crowd, no one realized that what had just happened would echo beyond the night. This wasn't just an awkward moment on TV. It was the beginning of something far more consequential. Something Kimmel hadn't seen coming. Something Arnold hadn't planned, but had been ready for all along. Arnold Schwarzenegger sat back in the chair, his frame still as stone, eyes locked onto Jimmy's. The studio lights gleamed faintly against his forehead, but he didn't blink, didn't shift, didn't try to soften what was coming. "I didn't come here for a laugh," he said, the words slipping through his Austrian accented English like a quiet warning, and though he didn't raise his voice, The sharpness of his tone cut clean through the fake comfort of late-night show banter. "I came here to talk about something serious. And if that's too much for you, then maybe you should ask yourself what kind of conversation you really want to be having with the American people." Jimmy forced a grin, but his eyes didn't follow. "Come on, Arnold," he said, one leg crossing over the other as he tried to steer things back into familiar territory. "Don't act like I haven't had serious talks on this show. I've had presidents, scientists, whistleblowers, you name it. We mix it up. That's the point." Arnold leaned forward, elbows on knees, his focus undisturbed. "You have them," he said, "but you don't listen to them. You let them talk for a few minutes, then you spin a joke to keep the crowd clapping. Make sure the audience doesn't get too uncomfortable. You treat the truth like it's optional, like it's only worth airing if it comes with a punchline." His voice grew denser, not louder, like a fog that slowly wraps around you without realizing it. "You sit in this chair every night and act like this country is just one big circus. And maybe you've gotten so used to applause that you've forgotten what accountability sounds like." The audience stirred slightly. A few murmurs drifted from the rows of seats, unsure whether they were still watching the performance or something real. Jimmy's smile dropped an inch, the edges pulling tight. "So now I'm the problem?" he said. "Me, the guy who's just trying to keep people entertained at the end of a long day. That's the enemy now?" Arnold didn't flinch. "No," he said, his voice level. "But you're part of the reason people don't trust anything anymore. You mock politicians from both sides like it's a sport. And then when someone tries to speak seriously, when someone tries to call out the actual mess, this country is in you undercut it with a wink and a joke. You may not be the problem, but you sure as hell aren't the solution." Jimmy exhaled slowly, trying to control the tightening heat in his chest. "I bring on voices from everywhere," he shot back. "People listen to this show, they laugh, they think, they vote. And yes, I joke, that's what I do. I'm not a senator, I'm not a governor. I'm a comedian with a desk. I'm not pretending to be more than that." Arnold tilted his head. "You can pretend all you want," he said, his accent sharpening the consonants just slightly, adding weight to every syllable. "But the truth is, you influence more minds than most governors. You reach millions. What you say matters, even when you think it doesn't. So when you laugh off real issues, when you reduce them to sketches and memes, you're shaping the way people see the world. You're telling them not to take it seriously." Jimmy's hands fidgeted under the desk now, fingertips tapping against the glossy wood. "I've had this show for years," he said, his voice thinner now, stretched between offense and self-defense. "I've seen the country change. I've seen what outrage looks like. I've seen what indifference looks like. And guess what? People don't want to be scolded. They don't want to be preached to. They want to feel like they're not powerless. That's what I try to give them." Arnold shook his head slowly, like a disappointed father. "That's what you tell yourself, but you're not giving them hope. You're giving them distraction. You're offering relief instead of direction. You hide behind the excuse of being just a comedian because it's easier than standing for something. But this country doesn't need more entertainment right now. It needs backbone. It needs truth, even when it's uncomfortable." The crowd was silent now. You could feel it, not just the hush, but the weight of everyone realizing they were watching something raw, something unscripted. Jimmy's shoulders stiffened. He wasn't used to this version of his own show. No laughter, no commercial breaks, no celebrity grins. Just Arnold, still seated, still calm, but relentless in a way that no monologue or sketch could ever be. "You came on this show with a message, fine," Jimmy said, swallowing once, keeping his voice steady. "But don't sit there and act like I'm the face of America's problems. You've played both sides of the fence. You've been Hollywood's golden boy and a Republican governor. You've made violent movies, environmental speeches, and protein shake ads. So don't pretend you're some moral compass now." Arnold didn't blink. "That's exactly why I can say this. I've been part of the noise. I've made my money in the spotlight, the camera, the studio system. I've stood next to presidents and producers. I've benefited from the very circus I'm calling out. And because I've been inside it, I know what it costs. I know what it takes from the public. And I know what responsibility looks like. I'm not better than you, Jimmy, but I've decided to stop hiding behind the image. For the first time, Jimmy didn't have a retort. He stared across the desk, eyes locked on Arnold, as if seeing him for the first time, not as an actor or politician or muscle-bound movie icon, but as a man trying to draw a line in the sand. Arnold wasn't trying to win the room. He was trying to wake it up. And no one was laughing anymore. Arnold sat upright now, his posture as disciplined as his words. He hadn't come to scold. He'd come to confront, and the difference was starting to show in every second of silence that followed. Jimmy Kimmel leaned back slightly, less in retreat than in recalibration. The weight in the room wasn't from the lights or the crowd anymore. It came from the realization that the interview had become something bigger than anyone expected. "So what's the answer then, Arnold?" Jimmy said finally, the words falling heavier than usual. "Since you've got the playbook, tell me, what does real leadership look like in your eyes? Because I've seen Republicans lie. I've seen Democrats fumble. I've seen the country pulled apart by people who sound a lot like you right now, talking about truth like it's something that's only found in their corner." Arnold didn't hesitate. Real leadership doesn't sell the people what they want to hear. It tells them what they need to know, he said, each word planted like a stone. And it doesn't hide behind tribal colors. This left versus right nonsense, it's not politics. It's performance art. It's W.E. in a suit and tie. The public is being played, night after night, while the real power gets consolidated behind closed doors. People are suffering while leaders are fundraising. People are angry while media personalities are cashing checks. That's not democracy. That's manipulation dressed up as patriotism. Jimmy didn't blink, but his breathing changed, slower, more deliberate. "You're preaching, Arnold," he said. "You're preaching from a chair that's just as high as the ones you're pointing fingers at. You act like you're above it all, but you were part of the machine too. You still are. You say you're not left or right, but people like you always show up right when it suits you, when there's a camera, when there's a message to polish. You walked into this studio to deliver a moment. Well, congratulations, you've got it. But don't mistake that for sacrifice." Arnold didn't smile. He nodded slowly, almost with approval. "You're right, I was part of it, and I won't run from that. I played the game movies, power, popularity. I climbed the mountain. But that's why I know what it looks like at the top. It's lonely. And worse, it's hollow if you get there for the wrong reasons. That's why I'm here now, speaking like this. Not for a moment, not for applause, but because I don't want to leave this world having contributed nothing but noise." Jimmy ran a hand through his hair, his familiar charm failing him now. This wasn't a bit. This wasn't a celebrity pitching a reboot or a personal brand. Arnold had turned the interview into an indictment. "So you're here to redeem yourself?" he said. "To save America with a 10-minute segment on my show?" Arnold leaned in again, this time with something deeper in his expression: exhaustion, maybe, or just clarity earned the hard way. "I'm here to remind people that we're running out of time," he said. "You want to talk climate? Fine. Let's talk climate. It's real. It's accelerating. But forget the polar bears for a second. People in this country are drinking poisoned water. Their homes are flooding. Their air is toxic. And all we give them is distraction debates about who tweeted what or who said something stupid 30 years ago. That's what the media feeds. That's what you feed." The words landed with force, not yelled, not dramatized, but measured like a scalpel. Jimmy opened his mouth, then shut it again. The silence wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was magnetic. You could hear the stillness in the audience as if they were holding their breath, waiting to see which of them would crack first. Arnold kept going, not angry, not boastful, just resolute. You asked me what leadership is. It's the willingness to be hated for telling the truth. It's saying things that don't trend well, don't fit into a headline, don't make anyone rich. It's speaking up when your career tells you to stay quiet. It's sitting in this chair and refusing to play the game, even if it costs you applause. Jimmy blinked twice. His eyes flicked toward the crowd, then back to Arnold. You talk about truth like it's a straight road, he said, his voice finally cracking at the edge. But it's not. Everyone thinks they've got the truth. Everyone thinks they're the only one who sees clearly. But I've interviewed climate activists and coal miners, gun control advocates and NRA members. I've had grieving mothers and retired generals. They all think they're right. And you know what? They're all scared. Every damn one of them. Arnold nodded once. That's why leadership matters. To give direction in the storm. To say, I hear you, but here's what we do next. Not to parrot their fears back to them. Not to entertain them while Rome burns. But to stand up and guide. Jimmy stood slowly, not storming off, just rising out of instinct, trying to breathe through the weight pressing down on the studio. He paced once behind the desk, a man circling an argument he couldn't quite escape. And who decides that direction? He said, You, a former governor turned action star? Is that where we are now, relying on men with catchphrases and protein powders to rebuild the country? Arnold stood, too not to intimidate, but to meet him eye to eye. If the people with real power won't do it, he said calmly, then yes, I'll take that burden. I'll speak. I'll act. I'll tell the truth, even if it means getting laughed off your stage. Jimmy stepped back. No one's laughing, he muttered. And he was right. No one was. Arnold stood firm, his body language unyielding, his presence commanding the room. Jimmy, on the other hand, was visibly rattled, pacing behind his desk like a caged animal. The space between them had become more than just physical. It had transformed into a battleground where words were the weapons, and neither side was willing to yield. The audience remained silent, sensing the gravity of what was unfolding. So what's your solution, Arnold? Jimmy asked, his voice now laced with a hint of sarcasm, though it was clear he was struggling to maintain his usual calm demeanor. We let the celebrities run the country? The same ones who pretend to have all the answers on Instagram while jetting around the world in private planes? Arnold's eyes narrowed, not with anger, but with an intensity that made the words hit harder. It's not about being a celebrity, Jimmy. It's about using the platform and influence for something meaningful. We can't keep pretending like this system works when it's rigged to serve the few at the expense of the many. I don't need a plane to know that people are hurting. I've seen it with my own eyes. He paused as if to let the weight of his words settle. Jimmy's lips pressed together in a tight line, but Arnold could see the frustration building in his expression. The tension in the room was palpable, and it was clear that this wasn't just a political discussion anymore. It was deeply personal. You keep talking about the people, Arnold, Jimmy shot back, his voice now sharp, biting. But what about the people who voted for the guy you endorsed? What about the ones who bought into the same lies you're now calling out? Did you think about them when you jumped ship? Or is this just the latest I'm above it all moment for you? Arnold's face tightened, but he didn't flinch. He took a slow, deliberate breath before responding. I didn't jump ship, Jimmy. I woke up. The difference is that I'm not afraid to call out my own mistakes. I'm not afraid to admit that I got things wrong. Can you say the same? The question hung in the air, heavier than any joke or witty remark Jimmy might have made in the past. Arnold wasn't trying to tear him down. He was calling for something deeper, a reckoning, perhaps. A challenge to the very framework that Jimmy, for all his charisma and fame, had become a part of. Maybe you're right, Jimmy said, his voice dropping a few notches. There was something almost bitter in the way he spoke now, as if he could feel the weight of the exchange crashing over him. But I can't take advice from someone who thinks the system is broken while he's still a part of it. You're talking about change, but you've got a foot in the old world. just like the rest of us. Arnold's jaw clenched. This wasn't about his past or his decisions. It was about the future. "You're wrong," he said, his voice low but unwavering. "I'm not holding on to the past. I'm trying to build something better. But we can't do that if we keep repeating the same old mistakes. The game is rigged, Jimmy, and if you keep playing by their rules, you're just another pawn in their game." Jimmy's face flushed, a rare crack in his usual cool exterior. He took a step closer to the desk, his eyes fixed on Arnold, challenging him. "You want to talk about being a pawn? You're one of the biggest ones on the board. Don't pretend like you're somehow above it all. You didn't have a problem with the system when it was working in your favor. Now that it's not, you're all high and mighty about change." Arnold didn't hesitate, his voice calm but brimming with resolve. "I've always known how the system works, Jimmy. I've been part of it, but that doesn't mean I'm going to sit back and let it destroy everything we've worked for. If we keep playing this game, we're doomed to keep losing." The words struck like a punch, leaving the audience hanging on the edge of every syllable. There was no more laughter, no more jokes. The show had turned into something entirely different, an interrogation, a challenge, a clash of ideologies. Jimmy's expression softened for a moment, his bravado faltering just enough for Arnold to notice. But then, just as quickly, the veneer of the host returned. He straightened up, pushing back against the mounting pressure with the kind of ease that only years of experience on live TV could afford. "All right," Jimmy said, a slight smile creeping onto his face, though it didn't reach his eyes. "So you're telling me, Arnold Schwarzenegger, that you've got the answers? That you're the one with the magic wand to fix everything? Is that it?" Arnold didn't flinch. "No, Jimmy. I'm telling you that the answers won't come from a single person. It won't come from a celebrity or a politician or a media personality. It's going to take all of us. And if you're too scared to say it, then someone has to." The air in the studio had shifted entirely. What started as a late-night interview had evolved into a full-scale confrontation. The crowd was no longer just watching. They were leaning in, waiting to see who would break first, if anyone would. Arnold held his ground, his eyes never leaving Jimmy's. "If you're not ready to stand for something real, then you're just part of the noise. And I won't be part of that anymore." The room fell into an eerie silence. The intensity in the air was palpable, the kind of silence that only comes when two giants are facing off, each unwilling to budge. Jimmy Kimmel, who had built a career on making light of almost every situation, now stood on the precipice of something much deeper than a comedy sketch. His usual banter had turned to dust, replaced by a weighty conversation that, despite all of its discomfort, felt necessary. Arnold, on the other hand, wasn't moving an inch. His hands were clenched at his sides, his jaw set in a way that said he wasn't just here to make a point. He was here to finish the fight, but it wasn't the kind of fight most people were used to. This wasn't about insults. This wasn't about the usual late-night jabs. This was about something real, something that transcended the glitz and glamour of Hollywood or the flashy, fast-paced nature of television. It was about truth. Jimmy opened his mouth, but there was no sharp retort this time. For the first time in the entire conversation, it seemed like he was weighing his words. The fast-paced, clever Jimmy Kimmel was no longer there. Instead, there was a man who was processing everything Arnold had said, even if he didn't want to admit it. "You know," Jimmy began, his voice noticeably softer now, though still tinged with that underlying cynicism he wore like a shield. "You talk about the system being broken. You talk about standing for something. But Arnold, when does it end? I mean, I get it. We're all pissed off about something. The world's a mess. But you can't just stand there and tell me it's all a simple fix." Arnold took a slow breath, his eyes locking with Jimmy's. "I'm not saying it's simple," he replied, his voice calm but firm, unwavering. "What I'm saying is that we have to start somewhere. If we keep waiting for someone else to fix it, we'll be waiting forever. Change doesn't come from talking about it. It comes from doing something about it. Jimmy's lips pressed into a thin line as he looked at Arnold. The crowd in the studio was so quiet now, you could hear a pin drop. They were hanging on every word, witnessing a shift in the dynamic that no one had expected. This wasn't just a clash of opinions, it was an evolution of thought, the kind of conversation that had long been missing from the national dialogue. "I agree," Jimmy muttered, almost as if he were saying it more to himself than to Arnold. "But it's hard when people don't want to listen. They don't want to believe that things can be different. That's what the media does. Man, they feed us stories that make us think we're too small to make a difference." Arnold's gaze softened, and for a moment, he stepped forward, his tone shifting from confrontation to something more akin to mentorship. "Jimmy, they feed us those stories because it's easier to keep us in line when we think we're powerless. But we're not powerless. Look around you. Look at the people who are still fighting, still standing, still working for something better. They're the ones making the difference. And you have the platform to help change the conversation, to shift the narrative. It's time to start using that power for something more than just jokes." Jimmy swallowed hard, feeling the weight of Arnold's words settle in. He'd spent his career in the entertainment industry, playing the role of the joker, the wisecracking host who could make people laugh, but rarely made them think. But this conversation, this moment, was something else. There was no turning back. For the first time, he was confronted with the reality that his role in the world, his impact, could be something much more profound than just a late-night television host. He glanced at the audience, who were all staring at him with wide eyes, waiting for his response. A brief flicker of doubt crossed his face, but he didn't look away from Arnold. He didn't hide behind the comfort of his jokes. He was in the moment, and for once, the performance was over. "Maybe you're right," Jimmy said quietly, his voice steadier now, less defensive. "Maybe I've been too focused on the easy laugh, too distracted by the noise. I guess I never thought about what I could do if I used this platform for something bigger." Arnold's expression softened, his eyes filled with a genuine understanding. "That's all it takes, Jimmy. It's not about being perfect. It's about taking action. Even small changes add up. And if enough of us start demanding more, we'll get more." The audience, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, finally reacted. A subdued but respectful round of applause broke the silence, a nod to the fact that, for all the tension, something had shifted. This wasn't the end of their disagreement, it was just the beginning of a different kind of conversation. One that didn't rely on sound bites or partisan bickering, but on real dialogue and accountability. Jimmy smiled, but it wasn't his usual mischievous grin. It was a smile of realization, of clarity. He extended a hand to Arnold. "Well, Arnold, I didn't expect to learn so much tonight," he said, his voice warmer than it had been since the start of the show. Arnold grinned back, shaking his hand firmly. "Neither did I, Jimmy. But that's the point. We never know what's possible until we start talking." The moment wasn't just a victory for Arnold, it was a victory for the audience, for the people watching at home who had seen something rare. They'd seen two men, from different worlds and with differing views, meet in the middle to discuss something far greater than the typical entertainment they expected from a late-night talk show. They had witnessed an exchange that had the power to spark real change. As Arnold walked off the stage, Jimmy sat back in his chair, the weight of the conversation still heavy on his shoulders. But there was no anger, no bitterness, only a quiet understanding that this moment, this rare and raw discussion, had been something worth having. And perhaps, just maybe, this was a new beginning for both of them.
Thank you for watching our channel Modern Stories. If you liked our video, you should subscribe for more amazing videos like this. Have a healthy and happy day. See you in the next one.